Hello and welcome back to Choices, Chapter 10. Today we're continuing the discussion about problem solving and some very specific steps that you can take to move from having an issue to getting it resolved and moving back to the okay zone. So Dr. Adams provides some tips about problem solving that will help you to ensure successful resolution of issues. The first step is to recognize that some problems are more complicated than others and require more time and ongoing effort to solve, whereas others can be solved quickly and you can move through them perhaps just in one problem solving session. So it's okay to have some more complicated ongoing problems that may take months or even the whole duration of the relationship to resolve. The idea is that making effective progress in these problems is also really important. The second tip is with most problems, there is no single perfect answer. So solutions to problems require compromise, some negotiation. There are advantages and disadvantages to every problem. The idea is not to look for the perfect solution, but the one that can effectively manage the problem and get you through to the okay zone. The third and most important tip is when it comes to problem solving, the most important thing you can do is stay on one team. So that's you and your partner versus the problem. You and your partner as allies, attacking the problem and never attacking each other. The next tip is to stay focused on the problem. Ideally, one problem being addressed at a time and not splintering off into multiple other problems. One at a time, bring it back and keep the focus on that one problem. And the final tip is to be strategic about problem solving. You want to choose the right time, the right place, and the right manner to address the issue. Being strategic helps to really increase the chances of effective problem solving. So Dr. Adams provides 6 very specific steps to take when it comes to addressing a problem. Let's start with the first step. Step 1 is to identify the real problem. There is a distinction between a supposed problem and a real problem. Supposed problem is what we typically address. This is the subject of the argument. That's the issue at hand. But underneath that supposed problem, there is likely a deeper real problem. So the suggestion is to identify what is going on beyond that superficial problem and address some of the deeper underlying issues. The real problems often involve vulnerability and are more difficult to share. Surface problems, the thing that we argue about, often triggers anger, but real problems usually have some insecurity or fear attached to it. Sometimes that insecurity has to do with the individual, sometimes it has to do with the relationship. The suggestion is to be able to distinguish between a supposed problem and a real problem and do your best to address the underlying issues. So let's talk about an example. So you recall Ed is the guy who came home from work and found a note from his wife Sophie saying she was out shopping, she was back in an hour, she did not return. He got angrier and angrier as time went on, started imagining that she was having an affair, convinced himself she was having an affair. She comes home and he assaults her. So the supposed problem in this situation is the fact that Sophie is not home when she said she would be. The real problem that Ed was experiencing were feelings of fear, insecurity, him worrying that she could be with somebody else, leaving him, that fear of being abandoned. That was the real issue. And whether or not he was able to address that with her, if he could identify the real problem himself, it would change the way he addresses the problem. So another example that we talked about was the guy who came home from work a little bit late, and his wife greeted him at the door with their newborn son and attacked him for being late. The supposed problem is he's home late. The real problem underneath that is that she was home with this newborn baby. She's insecure about her abilities as a mom. She's overwhelmed. She wanted him here to assure her, provide support. Those are real problems. If she was able to address the real problem, it would lead to far more effective problem solving. So sometimes addressing the real problem might not be realistic or comfortable, but if you're able to do this on your own and ask yourself, what am I really upset about? What are some of the more difficult, kind of vulnerable feelings that I'm experiencing? It can change the way you approach the problem. All right, step one. Let's move on to step two, which is to tell your partner how you see the problem. The way you bring up the problem and approach it with your partner has a really strong impact on how problem solving is going to go. If you can bring up a problem, discuss it with your partner in a way that encourages cooperation, working together, staying on one team, the chances for success in problem solving go way up. So here is where you want to avoid some of the issues we talked about in chapter 9, blaming, trying to figure out whose fault it is for having the problem, which turns the conversation into you versus me instead of us versus the problem. It's also very important at this step to stay focused on one problem at a time. So let's take, for example, the couple from chapter 9 who lives together and his mom is coming for a visit. She's going to be here in 20 minutes and their apartment is a mess. If he approaches this problem as the apartment is a mess, it's your fault because you were home all day, I worked 12 hours, that should have already been done, she is likely to respond possibly with a new problem, which is, I work part-time because I'm going back to school. We both agreed, and now you're blaming me because I'm home and you're working full-time. I always support your career. This is your fault because you never even told me your mom was going to be here to the last minute. You always do this. You wait till the last second. He responds by talking about how she doesn't show enough respect to his mom and caring enough about his family when he always does everything for her family. So we've gone from problem 1, the apartment is a mess, to like 5 or 6 new problems, some with even more significance, that are all going to cloud this issue so that problem number 1 doesn't get addressed, and now there's new conflict on top of it. This is how issues escalate. If instead he had been more strategic in how he brought up the problem and said something like, my mom is going to be here in 20 minutes. Let's see what we can do to get this place looking good. I'll take the bathroom and the bedroom. She might jump in by saying she could do the dishes and vacuum. There's a spirit of cooperation. They're getting stuff done. The problem is getting resolved. What changed is how he brought up the problem. Step 3 is to demonstrate some understanding of your partner's opinion. Which is not to say that you agree with your partner's opinion, but just that you understand it. Step 3 is difficult to do because it involves just listening without getting defensive, but asking your partner how he or she views the problem and demonstrates some understanding of their opinion. So you're going to use phrases like, okay, so what you're saying is, let me be sure I understand you. You're feeling like. The goal is to let them know you understand their perspective, not just to agree with them, but just to understand it. So let's say this couple is now discussing how important it is for her to work part-time and go to school instead of a full-time job. He might say something like, okay, so what you're saying is it's really important for you to finish your degree, and in the long term, it's going to lead to more income, and you've always supported my career, so you want some support in your career right now. Is that about right? By doing this and demonstrating understanding of your partner's opinion, you're helping to lower their resistance and defensiveness because they know that you understand them. Even if you're not agreeing with them, you understand what they're saying. So much of what we do in our arguing is to continue to reiterate our same points over and over and over again because don't feel heard. You're taking away this step and instead just directly demonstrating understanding of the other person's perspective. This all sets the stage for step 4, which is problem solving and creating as many possible solutions as possible. If you recall back to elementary school, this was called brainstorming. You just sat down and came up with idea after idea after idea. The goal here would be for you and your partner to sit down together and actually write this out as a list. Generate as many possible solutions to a problem as possible. At this stage, you're not trying to edit anything. You're just getting ideas on paper. And even if the idea isn't feasible, just talking about an idea might trigger another idea and get as many workable solutions as you can. On step 4, you want to be careful not to reject your partner's solutions, avoid any kind of bossy, controlling behavior as you're coming up with ideas, just getting ideas out on the table. Step 5 is mutually picking some solutions. So now that you have a list, begin the process of eliminating some things that you both agree won't work, and some negotiation and compromise to pick out some top contender ideas. Staying very mindful of the fact that working together and preserving the relationship is more important than this particular problem. This is all about being a team and identifying one solution. There might be several solutions. that could be possibly useful and put into place. So once you've got your solution, you've implemented it, you want to come back in step 6 to evaluate your progress. You're choosing a time to sit down and evaluate, how did this go? Maybe it's in a week, maybe it's in a month, but set a time. At this point, you're looking at progress, what worked, what didn't work. Maybe readjusting the solutions to the changing circumstances. But evaluating the progress and checking in with each other is really critical to long-term success. So you're taking a big problem, maybe it's finances, maybe it's parenting. It's likely going to take more than one round of this to continually evaluate progress, troubleshoot, make adjustments, and continually adapt your solution to ensure long-term success. So that's it, the 6 steps of problem solving. Let's move now to homework for chapter 10. Got questions 4 through 6. Number 4 asks you to explain, why is it more difficult to address the real problem than the supposed problem? Question 5, why is addressing the real problem important to problem solving? And you can look at this from the perspective of, why is it important for the couple to address the real problem? Even why is it important just on your own to address the real problem? And number 6, provide an example of a problem that came up in your relationship. Explain how you could address the problem using these 6 problem-solving steps. And as you're writing that out, be sure to identify each of the 6 steps. So if you're currently in a relationship, you can pull up a current situation, use that. If you're not in a relationship where that's not possible, think back to a problem, maybe one that surfaced in the relationship often. How could you use these 6 problem sets to address it? So that's the homework. Keep in mind, the real homework, beyond just reading this, listening to the information, is actually putting this into practice. It's very different to hear this information and read it than to try these skills in real life. So we have the opportunity, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's with your kids, even at work, to use some of this problem solving. Try it out. That's where the real practice comes in, and you start to feel comfortable with this. You don't have to know verbatim these 6 steps. It's more important just that you understand the spirit behind it, and you're making an effort to address problems more strategically and using some of these skills. So that is it for chapters 9 and 10. We'll see you back here for chapters 11, and it'll be 11 and 13. So we skip the review chapters. So good luck with these problem-solving skills, and we'll see you back here